Strike her once more and I'll paint these walls with your blood. The Alpha's inhuman growl reverberated through the pack court as my adoptive father's hand froze mid-strike. Beta Marcus Ashworth had just slapped me before the entire assembly, calling me worthless mongrel blood, but now Alpha Kieran Blackthorn stood like death incarnate, his obsidian eyes promising violence. The wolfsbane chains bit into my wrists as I knelt on the cold stone floor, my cheeks still burning from Marcus's blow. Around us, the pack court had fallen deadly silent. Every wolf present could feel the lethal energy radiating from their alpha, and I watched in stunned disbelief as Marcus actually took a step back. Alpha, Marcus stammered, his usual arrogance cracking. This mongrel has seduced 3 of our warriors. She's caused nothing but discord since. Silence. Kieran's voice was soft as silk and twice as dangerous. He moved with predatory grace down the steps from his throne, each footfall echoing like a death knell. Did I give you permission to touch what's mine? Mine? My heart hammered against my ribs. I'd barely spoken to the Alpha in my 18 years of life. He was a distant, terrifying figure who ruled our pack with an iron fist. Why would he? She's corrupted blood, Marcus spat, though he kept backing away. Unworthy of pack protection. The accusations were orchestrated. Kieran's words hit the court like a physical blow. Several pack members gasped, but his dark gaze never left Marcus. Did you really think I wouldn't discover your little scheme to remove her? Ice flooded my veins. A scheme? But the accusations were true. I had been with those warriors. I had caused problems. Hadn't I? Kieran stopped directly in front of me, so close I could feel the heat radiating from his massive frame. When he crouched down to my level, I caught his scent, wild pine and leather and something purely male that made my wolf stir in ways it never had before. Look at me, little wolf. I raised my eyes to meet his, and the impact nearly knocked me breathless. Where I expected to see cold calculation, I found something far more dangerous: possession. Raw, consuming possession that made my skin flush despite the pain of the wolfsbane. She belongs to me now, Kieran announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the court. Anyone who touches her, threatens her, or even looks at her wrong will answer to me personally. The proclamation sent shockwaves through the assembled pack. Alphas didn't claim accused traitors. They certainly didn't protect mongrels like me. But as Kieran's fingers traced the line of my jaw, avoiding the wolfsbane that would burn him, I realized with growing horror that this wasn't some spur-of-the-moment decision. You've been watching me, I whispered, the pieces clicking into place. How many times had I felt eyes on me during my runs through the forest? How many shadows had seemed to move when they shouldn't have? How long? His smile was all predator. Months, little wolf. I'd been waiting for the perfect moment. His thumb brushed dangerously close to my lower lip. And you gave it to me. This is outrageous. Marcus's voice cracked with fury and fear. You cannot simply claim her. She's accused of charges I'm dismissing. Kieran stood in one fluid motion, but his hand remained possessively on my shoulder. Clara Ashworth is under my protection now. My responsibility. My property. Property. The word should have made me angry, should have made me fight. Instead, something dark and primal in my wolf purred at the declaration. When Kieran's fingers pressed against my skin, the wolfsbane chain seemed to burn less. His touch was awakening something in me I'd never felt before, something dangerous and hungry and completely foreign. The pack will not stand for this, Marcus snarled, but I could see the sweat beading on his forehead. She's nothing but trouble. A mongrel who doesn't even know her own bloodline. The pack will stand for whatever I decree. Kieran's voice dropped to that deadly whisper again. Unless you'd like to challenge me for leadership, Marcus? The threat hung in the air like a blade. Everyone present knew Marcus was no match for Kieran in single combat. Hell, I wasn't sure anyone was. The Alpha was 6 feet 4 inches of solid muscle and barely contained violence, with power that made the air itself seem to vibrate around him. Marcus wisely said nothing. Good. Kieran bent and, with casual strength that made my stomach flutter, lifted me into his arms despite the wolfsbane chains. Court is dismissed. The pack scattered like leaves in a windstorm, but I barely noticed. All my focus was on the man carrying me as if I weighed nothing, his arms like steel bands around my body. The wolfsbane should have been burning him through my skin, but he showed no sign of pain. "Where are you taking me?" I managed to ask as he strode from the court with purposeful steps. "My chambers." His voice rumbled against my ear. "You're mine now, Clara. That means you stay where I can protect you." Protect me. The words should have been comforting, but something in his tone made them sound more like a threat than a promise. As we climbed the stairs to the Alpha's private quarters, a place no Omega had ever been allowed, dread began to mix with the confusing attraction burning in my veins. He kicked open the door to his bedroom, and I got a brief impression of masculine luxury before he deposited me on his massive bed. The mattress dipped under my weight, and I tried to scramble backward, but the wolfsbane chains made movement clumsy and painful. "Don't run from me, little wolf." Kieran's voice was almost gentle as he opened a drawer in his nightstand. When he turned back to me, he held silver restraints that gleamed wickedly in the lamplight. "You'll only hurt yourself." "What are you doing?" Panic spiked through me as he approached the bed with predatory patience. "Keeping you safe." He caught my wrists with surprising gentleness, but his grip was unbreakable. With efficient movements, he removed the wolfsbane chains and replaced them with the silver restraints, securing them to the headboard above me. "The pack isn't happy about my claiming you. There will be those who try to hurt you to get to me." The silver burned differently than the wolfsbane, more intense but somehow more bearable. As if my body was adapting to it in ways that should have been impossible. "This is kidnapping," I said, pulling uselessly at the restraints. Kieran laughed, the sound rich and dark as he settled on the edge of the bed beside me. "You think Marcus was your captor, little wolf?" His fingers traced along my collarbone, leaving trails of fire in their wake. "Your real imprisonment begins now." The words should have terrified me. Instead, they sent a shiver of something dangerously close to anticipation down my spine. As Kieran leaned closer, his scent surrounding me, I realized I was in far more trouble than I'd ever imagined. And the most terrifying part? Some dark corner of my soul was beginning to think I might like it. Chapter 2. Sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows pulled me from sleep, and for a moment I forgot where I was. Then the silver restraints around my wrists reminded me with a sharp bite of pain, and everything came rushing back: the pack court, Marcus's accusations, Kieran's explosive intervention. I was in the Alpha's bedroom, bound to his bed like some medieval prisoner. The room was empty, but I could hear movement from what sounded like a bathroom. Water running, the clink of glass. Kieran was here somewhere, probably getting ready for the day. Like this was perfectly normal. Like keeping a pack member chained up was just another Tuesday morning routine. I tested the restraints again, more out of frustration than any real hope of escape. The silver burned, but it was a manageable burn now, as if my body was somehow adapting. That shouldn't have been possible. Werewolves didn't build tolerance to silver. Yet here I was, bound in the stuff and relatively comfortable despite everything. "You're awake." Kieran's voice came from the doorway, and I turned to see him emerge from what was indeed a bathroom, a towel draped around his neck and his hair damp from a shower. He wore dark jeans and nothing else, and I had to force myself to look away from the impressive expanse of his chest. "Let me go." My voice came out hoarser than I'd intended, whether from sleep or the sight of him, I wasn't sure. "No." He moved to a dresser and pulled out a shirt, shrugging into it with casual grace. "How did you sleep? How do you think I slept?" I jerked against the restraints. "I'm chained to your bed like a prisoner." "You're protected." He turned to face me, and his dark eyes held that same unsettling intensity from the night before. "There's a difference." "Is there?" I challenged. "Because from where I'm sitting, this looks a lot like kidnapping." Something flickered across his face, amusement, maybe, or satisfaction. "You're not going anywhere, Clara. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be for both of us." A strange tingling sensation started at the base of my skull, spreading down my spine like warm honey. It was pleasant and alarming at the same time, and I had the bizarre urge to lean into it, to let it wash over me completely. My wolf stirred restlessly, as if responding to some call I couldn't hear. "What's happening to me?" I whispered, because something was definitely happening. The air itself seemed to shimmer between us, charged with an energy I'd never experienced before. Kieran went very still. His nostrils flared slightly, and when his eyes met mine again, they held a predatory gleam that made my heart race. "You feel it too." "Feel what?" "The bond." His voice was rough, as if the words were being torn from him. "It's snapping into place." The mate bond. I'd heard about it, of course, the mystical connection that formed between true mates when they came of age. But this couldn't be that. This was too intense, too consuming. It felt like something was trying to crawl under my skin and make itself at home. "That's impossible," I said, even as another wave of that strange tingling swept through me. "You're an alpha." "I'm nobody." "You're mine." The words came out like a growl, and he took a step closer to the bed. "You've been mine since the moment you presented at 16. The casual admission hit me like a physical blow. "What did you say?" Kieran ran a hand through his damp hair, and for the first time since I'd known him, he looked almost uncertain. "I've been watching you, Clara. Waiting. Planning." "Planning what?" But even as I asked, pieces were clicking into place in my mind. The way I'd always felt eyes on me during my runs through the forest. The strange coincidences that had led to my encounters with those pack warriors. The timing of Marcus's accusations, just after my 18th birthday. Everything. He moved to the window, staring out at the forest beyond. "Every interaction you've had with pack members, every rumor that spread about you, every moment that led us to yesterday, I orchestrated it all." The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. The accusations were real. I was with those warriors. Because I arranged for you to be alone with them. Because I made sure they'd be drawn to you. His reflection in the window met my eyes. Because I needed a legal way to claim you, and Marcus was more than happy to provide one. "Marcus?" The name came out as a whisper. Kieran turned back to me, his expression unreadable. "He sold you to me years ago, Clara. In exchange for pack protection when the Night Moon pack threatened our borders. But I needed more than just his word, I needed the pack to see you as mine by right." The world seemed to tilt around me. "Sold me?" "A business transaction." His voice was matter of fact, but his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "He gets to keep his position and his family safe." "I get you." Rage boiled up inside me, hot and righteous and completely useless given my current situation. "You're both monsters." "Yes." He didn't deny it, didn't try to justify it. "But I'm your monster now." The mate bond pulsed between us again, stronger this time, and I gasped at the intensity of it. It wasn't the gentle, comforting connection I'd heard described in pack stories. This was possessive and demanding and almost painful in its insistence that I acknowledge what was happening between us. "Why?" I asked, because I had to understand. "Why me? Why go to all this trouble?" Kieran was quiet for a long moment, staring at me with an expression I couldn't read. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer than I'd ever heard it. "Because the moment you shifted for the first time, everything in me knew you belonged to me. Because your scent drives me to the edge of madness. Because I've spent 2 years trying to convince myself I could let you go, and failing miserably every single day." The honesty in his words hit me harder than his earlier confessions. This wasn't just about possession or power, this was about obsession, pure and simple. He was obsessed with me, and that obsession had driven him to manipulate my entire life. I should have been terrified. I should have been disgusted. Instead, some dark part of me that I'd never acknowledged before stirred with something that felt dangerously like satisfaction. The most powerful wolf in our territory wanted me enough to orchestrate an elaborate scheme to claim me. Wanted me enough to risk pack unity and his own reputation. The realization that I wasn't entirely horrified by his actions was perhaps the most frightening thing of all. "You're insane," I whispered. "Probably." He moved closer to the bed again, and I caught his scent, pine and leather, and something uniquely him that made my wolf practically purr with contentment. "But you're still here. You're still mine. I don't have a choice. Don't you?" His hand touched my cheek, surprisingly gentle despite the silver burning my wrists above. "You could fight the bond. Reject it. Reject me." Could I? The mate bond was supposed to be unbreakable once it formed, but rejection was theoretically possible. Painful, potentially deadly, but possible. Yet even as the thought crossed my mind, something deep inside me recoiled from it. "I hate you," I said instead, though the words lacked conviction even to my own ears. "I know." His thumb traced along my jawline. "But you want me too. I can smell it on you." Heat flooded my cheeks because he was right, damn him. Despite everything, the manipulation, the imprisonment, the casual way he'd upended my entire existence, my body responded to his touch. The mate bond was making sure of that, flooding my system with chemicals that made him irresistible. "That's just the bond talking. Is it?" He leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "Or is it the part of you that's always known you were meant for something more than Marcus's scraps and pack gossip?" His words hit uncomfortably close to home. I had always felt like an outsider in the pack, always known I didn't quite fit. My unknown parentage, my unusual scent, the way other wolves seemed both drawn to and wary of me, it had all marked me as different. "I need to eat," I said, changing the subject because his proximity was making it hard to think clearly. "And I need to use the bathroom." Kieran straightened, studying my face for a moment before nodding. "I'll get you breakfast." "But Clara?" He paused at the bedroom door. "Don't do anything foolish while I'm gone. The windows are too high to jump from safely, and the door will be locked. You really are keeping me prisoner." "I'm keeping you safe," he corrected. "The pack is unsettled by yesterday's events. There are those who would hurt you to get to me." With that ominous warning, he left, and I heard the distinct sound of a lock turning. I was alone, trapped, and apparently mated to a man who'd manipulated my entire life to claim me. The worst part? The traitorous corner of my heart that was beginning to wonder if I minded as much as I should. I spent the next hour testing every possible escape route. The windows were indeed too high, we were on the 3rd floor of the pack house, and the drop would likely break bones even with werewolf healing. The bathroom had no windows at all, and the door was solid wood with a lock that wouldn't budge. When Kieran returned with a breakfast tray, I was sitting on the edge of the bed, glaring at him with as much hostility as I could muster. "Find what you were looking for?" he asked mildly, setting the tray on a side table. "My exit strategy." I lifted my chin defiantly. "Still working on it. You won't find one." He unlocked my restraints, and I rubbed at my wrists gratefully. The silver burns were already healing, which was another impossibility to add to my growing list. "But I'll give you some freedom to move around the room. Don't make me regret it." The breakfast was elaborate: eggs, bacon, fresh fruit, coffee that smelled like heaven. My stomach growled loudly, reminding me that I hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. "I can feed myself," I said when Kieran picked up the fork. "Can you?" He gave me a look that was part amusement, part challenge. "Prove it." It was a power play, I realized. Everything with him was going to be a power play: who was in control, who decided what, who had the final say in every aspect of my existence. The smart thing would be to go along with it, to pick my battles and bide my time. Instead, I grabbed the fork from his hand and dug into the eggs with aggressive determination. If he wanted to play games, I could play games too. "Better," he said approvingly, settling into a chair across from me. "But you'll learn to ask permission eventually." "Like hell I will." His smile was all predator. "We'll see." I ate in defiant silence, hyper-aware of his gaze on me with every bite. When I finished, he handed me a glass of orange juice and watched me drain it before speaking again. I have pack business to attend to this morning. You'll stay here. What if I refuse? Then I'll chain you to the bed again. His tone was conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. Your choice, Clara. Relative freedom or complete restraint. The casual way he offered those options made my blood boil. You can't keep me locked up forever. I can keep you safe forever. He stood, moving to the dresser again. When he turned back, he held a simple blue dress that looked about my size. Change into this. No. It wasn't a request. His voice hardened slightly. Your clothes from yesterday are ruined, and I won't have you walking around in what you slept in. I looked down at myself and realized I was still wearing the simple shift I'd worn to the pack court, now wrinkled and stained with blood from Marcus's blow. The dress he offered was pretty, feminine, and probably cost more than anything I'd ever owned. Turn around, I muttered, snatching the dress from his hands. I'll be back in a few hours. He moved toward the door, then paused. Clara? Don't try to leave this room. I'll know if you do, and you won't like the consequences. The door closed behind him with a solid thunk, followed by the sound of the lock engaging. I was alone again, trapped in a gilded cage with a dress that smelled like his hands and a mate bond that grew stronger every moment I stayed in his presence. I changed into the dress because my practical side won out over my stubborn side, barely. It fit perfectly, which was either impressive attention to detail or disturbing evidence of how closely he'd been watching me. Probably both. For the next 2 hours, I paced. I examined every inch of the room, looking for weaknesses, escape routes, anything I could use to my advantage. The furniture was heavy and expensive. The books on his shelves were an eclectic mix of pack law, military strategy, and surprisingly, romance novels. The man who'd orchestrated my capture apparently had a thing for happily ever afters. The irony wasn't lost on me. By the time afternoon sunlight was slanting through the windows, I'd made my decision. Kieran might think he had me caged, but I wasn't going to sit here like a docile pet waiting for his return. If there was no way out through the doors or windows, I'd have to get creative. The air vent in the corner was too small for a person, but the dumbwaiter in the wall near the bathroom was another story. It was old-fashioned, designed to carry food and supplies between floors, and just large enough for someone my size if they didn't mind tight spaces. It took me 20 minutes to work up the courage and another 10 to actually climb inside. The shaft was dark and cramped, but it led down, and down meant closer to ground level. Closer to escape. I made it to what I thought was the second floor before the whole plan went to hell. The dumbwaiter jerked to a stop with a grinding sound that echoed through the shaft, and I found myself stuck between floors with nowhere to go but back up. By the time I climbed back into Kieran's bedroom, my dress was torn, my hands were scraped raw, and I was covered in dust and cobwebs. I looked like I'd been wrestling with the building itself, which, in a way, I had. Going somewhere? I spun around to find Kieran leaning against the now open doorway, his arms crossed and his expression unreadable. He didn't look surprised to find me in this state, which meant he'd probably known about my escape attempt before he'd even reached his room. How did you? The dumbwaiter hasn't worked properly in decades. He straightened, closing the door behind him. I had it partially disabled years ago for security reasons. But I'm impressed by your initiative. Heat flooded my cheeks, whether from embarrassment or anger, I couldn't tell. You knew I'd try it. I hoped you would. He moved closer, and I instinctively backed away until I hit the wall. I want to see what you're capable of, Clara. How far you'll go to defy me. Why? His hand came up to rest against the wall beside my head, caging me in without quite touching me. Because I don't want a broken doll. I want a mate who'll challenge me, push back, make me work to keep her. The admission sent a shiver through me that had nothing to do with fear. You're twisted. Yes. His free hand traced along my jaw, his touch gentle despite the predatory intensity in his eyes. But so are you. You're just learning it. I wanted to deny it, wanted to tell him he was wrong. But as his scent surrounded me and the mate bond pulsed between us, I couldn't ignore the way my body responded to his nearness. Couldn't ignore the dark thrill that ran through me at his possessive words. "I need air," I whispered, because the room suddenly felt too small, too charged with tension I didn't know how to handle. "Then we'll go for a walk." His hand dropped from my face. "But you stay close to me. No running." It was more freedom than I'd expected, and I nodded quickly before he could change his mind. Anything was better than being cooped up in this room, even if it meant accepting his escort. We made it exactly 3 steps into the forest behind the pack house before my nerve broke and I ran. I heard his roar of fury behind me, but I was already shifting, my wolf form bursting free in a shower of torn fabric and desperate energy. 4 legs were faster than 2, and for a glorious moment I thought I might actually make it to the pack borders before he caught me. I should have known better. Kieran tackled me mid-leap, both of us hitting the ground hard enough to knock the breath from my lungs. By the time I could focus again, I was back in human form and pinned against the rough bark of an oak tree, his hands braced on either side of my head. "Run from me again," he growled, his face inches from mine and his eyes blazing with a fury that made my wolf whimper in submission, "and I'll chain you to my bed for a week. Test me." The threat should have terrified me. Instead, it sent heat pooling low in my belly and made my pulse race with something that definitely wasn't fear. The mate bond was singing between us, amplified by his anger and my defiance, and I could see the exact moment he realized how my body was responding to his dominance. "You liked that," he said softly, his voice rough with surprise and something darker. "You like me chasing you." I opened my mouth to deny it, but no words came out. Because he was right, and we both knew it. Chapter 3. The ancient tome lay open between us on Kieran's desk, its yellowed pages filled with symbols I'd never seen before but somehow understood. The language was old, older than our pack, older than any pack I knew of, yet the words seemed to burn themselves into my mind as I read. The bloodline of the Crimson Moon carries within it the power to heal or destroy, to bind or break the strongest of curses, *. "This is impossible," I whispered, my fingers trembling as I traced the faded illustration of a wolf with eyes like molten silver. "The Crimson Moon pack was destroyed centuries ago." "Not destroyed," Kieran corrected, his voice carefully controlled. "Hunted to near extinction. There were survivors, scattered, hidden, their bloodlines diluted over generations." His dark gaze fixed on me with an intensity that made my skin crawl. "But not yours, Clara. Your blood runs pure." The weight of his revelation settled over me like a shroud. Everything I'd believed about myself, about my heritage, had been a lie. I wasn't just some mongrel foundling Marcus had taken in out of pity. I was the descendant of the most feared werewolf bloodline in history. "How do you know?" I demanded, though part of me already suspected the answer. "Because I've been having your blood tested for months." He moved to the window, staring out at the forest where the first hints of dusk were painting the sky crimson. "Every time you visited the pack doctor for injuries, every time you donated blood for pack drives, I had samples taken. More manipulation. More lies. You bastard." "Yes." He didn't deny it, didn't even try to justify it. But I had to be sure. "The curse is getting stronger, Clara. Every full moon, every time I shift, the bloodlust becomes harder to control. Soon, I won't be able to contain it at all." I stared at his broad shoulders, noting the tension in every line of his body. "What curse?" "A blood debt from my grandfather's time." His reflection in the window looked haggard, older than his 30 years. "The night moon packs which cursed our bloodline after we killed their alpha in territorial dispute. Every firstborn son would eventually succumb to an insatiable hunger for violence, becoming more monster than man. The pieces were falling into place now, painting a picture that made my stomach churn. And you think my blood can break it? I know it can." He turned back to me, and for the first time since I'd known him, I saw genuine desperation in his eyes. "The ritual requires a willing mate of Crimson Moon blood during the blood moon. Her power transfers to her mate, cleansing the curse from his line forever." "And what happens to me?" His silence was answer enough. "You'll die," I said flatly. Or worse. The texts are unclear. He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Some say the donor dies. Others say she becomes bound to her mate's soul for eternity, their life forces intertwined. Wonderful options. I slammed the book shut, the sound echoing through the room like a gunshot. So you've orchestrated my entire life, manipulated me into a mating bond, all so you can use me as some kind of magical blood bag to save yourself from a family curse. Clara. Don't. I stood abruptly, pacing to the far side of the room. Don't try to make this about anything other than what it is. You need me to fix your problem, consequences to me be damned. The consequences matter to me more than you know. His voice was rough with an emotion I couldn't identify. But I won't apologize for doing whatever it takes to save my pack from what I might become. Before I could respond, a knock at the door interrupted us. Kieran's expression hardened as he called for entry, and I was surprised to see Elena Ashworth step into the room. My adoptive sister looked nervous but determined, her blonde hair pulled back in a severe bun and her green eyes avoiding mine. Alpha, she said formally, inclining her head. You asked me to report when I had news. Elena? I stared at her in confusion. What are you doing here? She finally met my gaze, and I saw guilt there, sharp and unmistakable. I'm sorry, Clara. I never wanted it to go this far. Ice formed in my veins. What are you talking about? She's been my spy, Kieran said bluntly. For the past 2 years, Elena has been feeding me information about your activities, your habits, your interactions with other pack members. The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. Elena, my sister, my closest friend, the one person I'd thought I could trust, had been reporting on me to the man who'd manipulated my entire existence. Why? The word came out as barely a whisper. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. Father made a deal. Information about you in exchange for protection for me and Mother when you were claimed. He knew what Alpha Blackthorn was planning, and he wanted to ensure our safety. Your father has always been a practical man, Kieran observed coldly. He understood that loyalty to the pack required certain sacrifices. Sacrifices. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Is that what I am? A sacrifice? You're necessary, he said simply. And the blood moon rises tonight. The revelation sent a chill through me. Tonight. After everything I'd learned, everything I'd been put through, he expected me to willingly participate in a ritual that might kill me. Tonight. I won't do it, I said firmly. Find another way. There is no other way. Kieran's voice was flat, final. And you will do it, Clara. Because if you don't, I'll start killing pack members one by one until the bloodlust is satisfied. Your friends, your neighbors, children who've done nothing wrong, their blood will be on your hands. The threat was delivered with such casual certainty that I knew he meant every word. The curse was already affecting him, making him capable of monstrous choices. How long before he stopped being able to make the choice at all? You're already a monster, I whispered. Yes. His agreement was matter of fact. But I'm a monster who can still be reasoned with. For now. Elena stepped forward, her face pale but resolute. Clara, there's something else you need to know. About your childhood, about why you've always felt different. I looked at her warily. What now? Father has been dosing you with wolfsbane. Small amounts, dissolved in your food and drink since you were 8 years old. Just enough to suppress your abilities without causing obvious harm. The room spun around me. He's been poisoning me? To keep you controllable, Kieran confirmed grimly. Marcus suspected what you were from the beginning, but he needed to keep your power dormant until I was ready to claim you. Wolfsbane in small doses over years would explain why your abilities have been so limited, why you've never shown the strength your bloodline should possess. Years of weakness, of feeling like a failure as a werewolf, of believing I was defective, all because Marcus had been slowly poisoning me to keep me manageable. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. How long have you known? I asked Elena. Since I turned 18 and father explained our family's arrangement with the Alpha. She wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. I tried to find ways to warn you, but you chose your own safety over mine. The words came out bitter, final. You chose to let me be used. I chose to survive. Elena's voice hardened. Just like you'll choose to go through with the ritual. Before I could respond, an explosion of sound erupted from outside, howls of pain and alarm, the crash of breaking glass, the distinctive ring of silver meeting silver. We were under attack. Kieran was moving before the echoes faded, pulling weapons from a hidden panel in his desk with practiced efficiency. Night Moon Pack, he growled. Vincent Cross has come for you. For me? Your bloodline isn't the only cure for supernatural curses. He tossed me a silver-bladed knife, the handle warm from his touch. Every supernatural creature with a blood debt or curse wants a piece of what you carry. Vincent's pack has been cursed with madness. He needs your power as much as I do. Another crash shook the building, closer this time. Through the window, I could see dark shapes moving through the forest, too many to count and all heading for the pack house. The blood moon, Elena breathed, pointing at the sky where a crimson orb was rising above the treeline. The ritual window is opening. Kieran's eyes found mine across the room, and I saw the desperation there, the need. Clara, we have to do this now. Before Vincent reaches us. No. I backed toward the door, the knife clutched in my hand. I won't be used by you or him or anyone else. Then we'll all die tonight. His voice was deadly calm. Vincent won't leave witnesses, and my pack can't hold off his forces indefinitely. As if summoned by his words, the door exploded inward in a shower of splinters and silver. Vincent Cross stood in the doorway, flanked by two massive warriors I didn't recognize. The Night Moon Alpha was everything Kieran wasn't, golden-haired, pale-eyed, with a smile that promised pain. Kieran Blackthorn, Vincent said pleasantly, stepping into the room with predatory grace. Still collecting strays, I see. Vincent. Kieran positioned himself between the intruders and me, every line of his body coiled for violence. You're trespassing. And you're hoarding what doesn't belong to you. Vincent's pale gaze fixed on me with hungry intensity. Hello, Clara. I've been looking forward to meeting you. The way he said my name made my skin crawl. Whatever Vincent had planned for me, it was nothing good. The girl stays here, Kieran snarled, and I could see the change beginning in him, the curse responding to the threat. His eyes were darkening, pupils dilating, and the air around him seemed to shimmer with barely contained violence. Actually, she comes with me. Vincent's smile widened, showing teeth that were slightly too sharp. Unless you prefer to watch me tear apart your pack piece by piece while you're helpless to stop me. The standoff might have continued indefinitely, but the blood moon chose that moment to fully clear the treeline. Crimson light poured through the windows, and I felt something deep inside me respond to its call. Power, raw and ancient, began to stir in my veins. The wolfsbane that had suppressed my abilities for years was finally losing its hold. The sensation was overwhelming, like fire and ice and electricity all at once. I gasped, doubling over as energy coursed through me in waves I couldn't control. Both alphas turned toward me, their supernatural senses picking up the change immediately. It's starting, Vincent breathed, his eyes lighting with avarice. The awakening. Kieran was beside me in an instant, his hands on my shoulders, his voice urgent in my ear. Clara, look at me. Focus on my voice. But I couldn't focus on anything except the power building inside me, demanding release. The crimson moon blood was awakening after years of suppression, and it wanted out. She's magnificent, Vincent murmured, taking a step closer. I can feel the power from here. Kieran, surely you realize sharing her abilities would benefit both our packs? She's mine. The words came out as a growl, and I felt Kieran's grip tighten possessively. The bond is already in place. Bonds can be broken. Vincent gestured to his warriors, who began spreading out to flank us. Especially incomplete ones. That's when I realized what they were waiting for. The mate bond between Kieran and me was strong, but it wasn't complete. We hadn't fully mated, hadn't sealed the connection in the most primal way possible. Until we did, I was still vulnerable to claim by another alpha. And Vincent clearly intended to claim me whether I was willing or not. "Choose quickly, Clara," Vincent said, his voice taking on an alpha's commanding tone that tried to burrow into my mind and force compliance. "Me willingly, or me by force. Either way, you're coming with me tonight." The compulsion in his voice should have worked. Alpha commands were nearly impossible for lower-ranking wolves to resist. But the power flowing through me now was older than pack hierarchies, stronger than artificial authority. Instead of submitting, I felt my own wolf rise to meet his challenge. "I don't think so," I said quietly, and my voice carried an authority I'd never possessed before. Both alphas went very still, recognizing the change in me. The submissive omega they'd been fighting over was gone, replaced by something far more dangerous. Vincent's expression shifted from confident to wary. "Interesting. But raw power without training is just chaos, little wolf. You can't control what you don't understand." He was right, and we all knew it. The energy coursing through me was magnificent and terrifying, but I had no idea how to direct it. I was as likely to bring the building down around us as I was to defend myself. That's when Kieran made his choice. Without warning, he spun me around and crushed his mouth to mine in a kiss that was all possession and desperation. The mate bond, already strained to its limits, snapped fully into place with an almost audible crack. Power exploded between us, mine flowing into him, his consciousness opening to mine in a connection so intimate it left me breathless. But something went wrong. Instead of the curse being cleansed by my power, I felt it merge with Kieran's essence, twisted and amplified by the ancient magic in my blood. His eyes, when he pulled back from the kiss, were no longer their familiar dark brown. They were silver, the same molten silver from the illustration in the tome. "No," I whispered, but it was too late. Vincent's warriors charged, but Kieran moved faster than should have been possible, cutting them down with brutal efficiency. There was no strategy to his attacks, no technique, just pure, overwhelming violence driven by supernatural strength. Elena screamed from somewhere behind me. More warriors poured through the doorway. And through it all, Kieran fought like a creature possessed, his movements inhuman in their speed and savagery. The ritual had worked, but not the way either of us had expected. Instead of breaking the curse, my power had transformed it into something else entirely. Something worse. Vincent backed toward the window, his face pale with genuine fear. "What have you done?" he demanded. I stared at Kieran as he stood amid the carnage, his chest heaving and his silver eyes fixed on me with an intensity that made my soul quiver. When he smiled, I saw fangs that hadn't been there before. "I've created exactly what I needed," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated in my bones. "A mate who belongs to me completely, and power enough to take whatever I want." The blood moon reached its zenith, bathing us all in crimson light, and I realized with growing horror that the man I'd mated with was no longer entirely human. The ritual had bound our souls together, just as the texts had warned, but it hadn't saved him from becoming a monster. It had made him into something infinitely more dangerous. And now, whether I wanted it or not, I belonged to him completely. Chapter 4. The moment Kieran's silver eyes met mine across the carnage-strewn room, I felt it, a connection deeper than the mate bond, stronger than magic itself. His rage was my rage, his bloodlust a living thing that pulsed through our shared consciousness. But beneath the monster he'd become, I could still sense the man I'd bound myself to. And I could control him. "Kieran," I said softly, my voice cutting through the chaos as more of Vincent's warriors poured through the shattered doorway. "Stop." He froze mid-strike, his claws inches from a fallen warrior's throat. Every line of his body screamed violence, but he couldn't disobey me. The realization sent a thrill of dark satisfaction through my veins. Vincent, backing toward the window with genuine fear in his pale eyes, noticed the exchange. Impossible. No one controls an alpha in bloodlust. I'm not just anyone. I stepped over the bodies littering the floor, moving toward my mate with newfound confidence. I'm Crimson Moon blood, and he belongs to me now. The power flowing through me was intoxicating, stronger with every passing moment as the blood moon reached its peak. Years of suppression had been building to this, and now that the wolfsbane was finally purged from my system, I could feel the true extent of what I was capable of. Clara! Elena's scream cut through my dark revelry. She was pressed against the far wall, her face white with terror as she stared at something behind me. I turned to see Marcus Ashworth standing in the doorway, but he wasn't alone. A dozen more warriors flanked him, but these weren't Vincent's people. These were from our own pack, wolves I'd known my entire life, now looking at me with a mixture of fear and greed. "Hello, daughter," Marcus said, his voice dripping with false affection. "You've grown into your power beautifully." "You're supposed to be dead," Kieran growled, his silver eyes fixed on the man who'd raised me. "I gave orders. To eliminate the beta who'd outlived his usefulness?" Marcus smiled coldly. "Alpha Cross made me a better offer. Your mate's bloodline in exchange for power beyond imagination." The betrayal shouldn't have surprised me. Marcus had been selling me piece by piece my entire life. But seeing him allied with the wolves trying to capture me still sent rage boiling through my veins. "You never cared about me," I said quietly. "I was just a commodity to be traded. A very valuable commodity." Vincent had regained some of his composure, though he kept his distance from Kieran. "Do you know what you really are, Clara? What your bloodline truly represents?" I felt Kieran tense beside me, his consciousness brushing against mine through our bond. There was something he wasn't telling me, something about my heritage that went deeper than what I'd already learned. "Tell me," I demanded. Marcus stepped forward, his expression almost paternal in its false warmth. "Your parents weren't murdered by rogues, Clara. They were sacrificed. By your own grandmother, to create the very curse that's now consuming your mate." The words hit me like a physical blow. "What?" "The Crimson Moon pack wasn't destroyed by outsiders," Vincent continued, his voice taking on the cadence of someone telling an often repeated story. "They were destroyed from within. Your grandmother, Lydia Crimson, discovered that the pack's power came with a terrible price. Each generation grew stronger, but also more unstable. More violent. She tried to break the cycle," Marcus added. "Used blood magic to create a curse that would contain the worst of the Crimson Moon legacy, transferring it to an enemy bloodline where it could be controlled." I stared at them both, my mind reeling. The Blackthorn curse was meant to hold your family's darkness until a true Crimson Moon heir could be born to reclaim it. Vincent's smile was sharp as a blade. "But your grandmother underestimated the potency of what she was dealing with. The curse didn't contain the darkness, it amplified it. And now, thanks to your ritual, that amplified power flows through both you and your mate." The implications crashed over me in waves. My parents had died to create the very curse that had driven Kieran to claim me. Their sacrifice had been meant to protect future generations, but it had only made everything worse. And now that power lived in me, in us, stronger than ever. "But here's the beautiful irony," Marcus continued, his eyes gleaming with malicious satisfaction. "The curse can still be broken. All it takes is the death of the one who completed the ritual." "Kieran," I whispered, understanding flooding through me. "Or you," Vincent added helpfully. "Since your souls are bound, either death will break the curse and free all that power for someone else to claim." The choice they were offering was no choice at all. Die myself, or watch Kieran die and follow him into whatever darkness awaited beyond. The bond between us was absolute. I could feel his life force intertwined with mine, his heartbeat echoing in my chest. "There's a third option," I said slowly, an idea forming in the depths of my mind. "One you haven't considered." Both alphas looked at me with sudden wariness. "I could embrace what I am instead of fighting it." The words came from some deep, dark place inside me that I'd never acknowledged before. I could stop trying to break the curse and start using it. Kieran's silver eyes blazed with understanding and approval. Through our bond, I felt his wholehearted agreement, his desire to see me claim the power that was rightfully mine. "You don't understand what you're suggesting," Marcus said, but there was fear in his voice now. The Crimson Moon legacy isn't just power, it's madness. Violence. An insatiable hunger for dominance that destroys everything it touches. Maybe that's exactly what this world needs. I smiled, and felt Kieran's answering smile through our connection. Maybe it's time to stop pretending to be civilized. Vincent lunged forward then, his patience finally snapping. But he was too slow, too predictable. The power flowing through me made everything crystalline clear. I could see his attack coming before he'd even committed to it. I caught him mid-leap, my hands closing around his throat with strength I'd never possessed before. His eyes widened in shock as I lifted him off the ground effortlessly. "Did you really think you could threaten me in my own territory?" I asked conversationally. "Steal what belongs to me?" "Clara, please," he gasped, clawing at my hands. "Please what?" "Please show mercy to the alpha who planned to rape and torture me into submission." I tilted my head, studying his terrified face. "I don't think so." The snap of his neck was surprisingly satisfying. I dropped his body to the floor and turned to face Marcus, who was backing away with rapidly growing panic. "My turn," Kieran said, his voice a rumble of dark anticipation. "No." I held up a hand, stopping him. "This one is mine." Marcus had raised me, fed me poisoned food for years, sold me to the highest bidder, and betrayed me at every turn. If anyone deserved a personal touch, it was him. "Clara, you don't want to do this," he pleaded, his composure finally cracking completely. "I'm your father. I raised you, protected you. You poisoned me." I began walking toward him, savoring the way he flinched with each step. "You sold me. You handed me over to monsters." I smiled, feeling something predatory and satisfied settle into my bones. "But most importantly, you underestimated what I'd become. The pack will never accept this," he said desperately. "They'll revolt, challenge your authority. Let them try." I gestured to the warriors who'd come with him, all of whom were now backing toward the exits. "Any of you who want to challenge me, step forward. I'll make it quick." None of them moved. Smart wolves. Marcus made one last desperate play, pulling a silver knife from his belt and lunging toward Elena. "If I can't have you, I'll take her." He never reached my sister. My power lashed out instinctively, stopping his heart mid-beat. He dropped like a stone, his knife clattering harmlessly to the floor. The silence that followed was profound. "Well," Elena said faintly, staring at Marcus's body. "I guess that solves the family succession problem." I almost smiled at her dark humor, but something was wrong. The rage that had driven me to kill Vincent and Marcus wasn't fading. If anything, it was growing stronger. I wanted more violence, more blood, more proof of my dominance over those who dared to threaten what was mine. Through our bond, I felt Kieran experiencing the same dark hunger. But where it should have terrified me, it only made me feel more complete. More right. "This is what we are," I said softly, meeting his silver gaze across the room. "This is what we were always meant to become." "Monsters," he agreed, but he said it like an endearment. "Beautiful monsters." I moved to his side, fitting perfectly against him despite the blood and carnage surrounding us. Unstoppable together. The remaining warriors and pack members were fleeing now, spreading word of what they'd witnessed. Some would challenge us eventually, but most would submit to the new order we represented. And those who couldn't accept it, well, we'd deal with them as they came. "The pack will fear us," Kieran murmured against my ear. "Good." I leaned into his embrace, feeling utterly content for the first time in my life. Fear breeds respect. And respect breeds obedience. What about love? I considered the question seriously. Did I love him? The emotion felt too small, too limited for what existed between us now. We were bound by something far more profound than love, by power, by darkness, by a shared hunger for dominance that completed us both. "Love is for the weak," I said finally. "We have something better." "What's that?" "Forever." I turned in his arms, studying his transformed features. The silver eyes, the slightly elongated canines, the aura of barely contained violence that clung to him like cologne. We're immortal now, you know. The ritual didn't just bind our souls, it made us something beyond ordinary werewolves. He nodded slowly. I can feel it. The changes are still happening. They were. I could sense my own body adapting, becoming stronger, more resilient. The Crimson Moon legacy wasn't just magical power, it was physical transformation, evolution into something that transcended the normal limitations of our species. Clara, Elena said hesitantly from across the room. Are you still you? I looked at my adoptive sister, noting the fear in her green eyes, the way she pressed herself against the wall as if trying to disappear. Such a fragile thing, so human despite her wolf blood. I'm more myself than I've ever been, I told her honestly. But if you're asking whether I'm still the weak, frightened girl who let herself be pushed around by every alpha with an opinion, then no. That girl is dead. Elena nodded slowly, and I could see her calculating her options. Stay and serve the new order, or run and hope we didn't consider her enough of a threat to hunt down. You can stay, I offered generously. I'll need someone to help manage the mundane aspects of pack leadership. And if I refuse? I shrugged. Then you leave tonight and never come back. But Elena? I let just a hint of the power in my voice surface. If you ever betray me again, I'll make Marcus's death look merciful by comparison. She paled but nodded. I understand. Good. I turned back to Kieran, dismissing her from my attention. There were more important things to focus on now, like the strange new sensations beginning to surface in my body. It took me a moment to identify what I was feeling, and when I did, shock rolled through me in waves. Through our soul bond, I felt Kieran's matching amazement as he sensed it too. Impossible, he whispered. Not impossible. I placed a hand over my abdomen, where something new and powerful was stirring to life. Just unprecedented. Pregnant. I was pregnant, and the child growing inside me carried both our darkness, both our power. A being that would be born with abilities that dwarfed even what we'd become. The thought should have terrified me. Instead, it filled me with a fierce, protective joy that surprised me with its intensity. Our heir, Kieran said reverently, his hand covering mine. Our legacy. I smiled, imagining what we could build together, what kind of world we could create for our child. The first of a new breed. The pack won't know what to do with us. Then we'll teach them. I looked around the blood-soaked room, at the bodies of those who'd tried to use me, control me, claim me. We'll teach them all. 6 months later, I sat on a throne carved from the bones of our enemies, my hand resting on my swollen belly as I surveyed the pack that now belonged to us completely. The changes in my body had accelerated as the pregnancy progressed. I was stronger, faster, more beautiful in a way that hurt to look at directly. But it was the changes in our dynamic that truly shocked our people. Kieran knelt beside my throne, his head bowed in public submission that defied every tradition our species had ever known. The most feared alpha in living memory, reduced to my enforcer, my weapon, my devoted servant. It wasn't weakness that put him on his knees, it was recognition of true power. I was the source of our strength, the wellspring from which all our abilities flowed. He was my instrument, perfectly crafted to carry out my will. The Shadowrock pack requests an audience, Elena announced from her position at the base of the throne dais. She'd adapted to our new order with surprising ease, becoming my voice when I didn't want to speak directly to lesser wolves. Denied, I said without looking up from the territorial reports I was reviewing. They can submit their tribute with the others. And if they refuse? I smiled, feeling the baby kick in response to my amusement. Even in the womb, our child was responding to displays of power. Then Kieran can visit them personally. I stroked my mate's dark hair, feeling his readiness to violence through our bond. I'm sure they'll see reason after that. Elena nodded and made a note on her tablet. The Council of Alphas has also requested. No. I finally looked up, meeting her gaze with eyes I knew now held flecks of silver that grew brighter with each passing day. I'm not interested in their politics or their fears. If they want to parley with us, they can come here and kneel like everyone else. Clara, Elena said carefully, some of them are calling you the Blood Clara. They say you're more monster than wolf now. I laughed, the sound echoing off the stone walls of our throne room. How flattering. And what do they call him? The Mad Alpha. They say he's lost his mind to your power. I looked down at Kieran, noting the way his shoulders shook with silent laughter. Mad? Perhaps. But madness was just another word for freedom from the constraints that held lesser beings back. Let them talk, I said finally. Fear keeps them in line better than respect ever could. And our child? Elena asked quietly. What will you tell them when they ask about the baby? I placed both hands on my belly, feeling the incredible strength already emanating from the life growing within me. This child would be born with power that eclipsed anything our world had ever seen, part Crimson Moon legacy, part Blackthorn curse, part something entirely new. I'll tell them the truth, I said softly. That we've created the future. A new kind of werewolf for a new kind of world. And if that frightens them? I smiled, feeling Kieran's answering smile through our bond, feeling our child's approval pulse through my body like a blessing. Good, I said simply. It should. Outside our stronghold, the other packs whispered about the Blood Clara and her Mad Alpha, about the beautiful monsters who ruled from a throne of bones and the even more dangerous monster they were bringing into the world. Let them whisper. Let them fear. We had forever to show them exactly what we were capable of. Epilogue. 3 years later. The sound of children's laughter echoed through the gardens of Blackthorn Manor, a sound that would have seemed impossible just a few years ago when these grounds had been soaked in blood and fear. Now, sunlight danced through the ancient oak trees while small figures darted between the flower beds, their joy infectious even to the most hardened pack members. I watched from the stone balcony of our private chambers as our daughter Lydia, named for my grandmother, though she would write a very different legacy, chased a butterfly with the determined focus only a 3-year-old could possess. Her dark hair caught the afternoon light, revealing the silver streaks that marked her as something special, something new. When she laughed, the sound sent warmth through the mate bond one shared with Kieran, a reminder that even monsters could create something beautiful. She's going to be trouble, Kieran murmured, coming up behind me to wrap his arms around my waist. His voice held nothing but fond pride as he watched our daughter attempt to catch a butterfly that was clearly enjoying the game as much as she was. She's going to be magnificent, I corrected, leaning back against his chest. Look at her, Kieran. She's not afraid of anything. And it was true. Lydia approached the world with a fearlessness that came from knowing she was loved unconditionally, protected absolutely. The power that flowed through her small body would have terrified our enemies, but she used it with the innocent joy of a child who had never known anything but acceptance. Mama. Daddy. Lydia's voice rang out across the garden as she spotted us on the balcony. She abandoned her butterfly chase immediately, racing toward the manor with supernatural speed that would have been alarming in any other child. When she reached the base of the building, she simply leaped, using her inherited abilities to bound directly onto our balcony in a move that defied physics. Show off, I said fondly, catching her in my arms as she launched herself at me with complete confidence that I would be there to catch her. Did you see the butterfly, Mama? It was purple and gold and it wanted to play with me. Her silver-flecked green eyes, a perfect blend of mine and Kieran's, sparkled with excitement as she recounted her adventure. I saw, I assured her, smoothing down her wild hair. Did you remember to be gentle with it? Of course. Elena told me that butterflies are fragile, so I only used a little bit of my strength. She turned to Kieran, her expression suddenly serious. Daddy, Uncle Marcus is here again. He brought more flowers for the garden. I felt Kieran's body tense slightly behind me, though his voice remained calm. Is he now? And how do you feel about Uncle Marcus's visits? Lydia considered this with the gravity of a much older child. I like him. He's sad sometimes, but he tries to make the garden pretty for us. And he tells good stories about when you and Mama were little. Marcus, not the Marcus who had raised me, but his younger brother David, who had taken the family name after his elder sibling's death, had appeared at our gates 6 months ago. He'd come expecting to find monsters, perhaps seeking revenge for his brother's demise. Instead, he'd found a family. The transformation in our pack's dynamics over the past 3 years had been gradual but profound. What had started as rule through fear had evolved into something far more complex, a community where strength was still respected, but where loyalty was earned through protection and care rather than demanded through violence. Should I go say hello? Lydia asked, though she was already wriggling to get down from my arms. In a moment, Kieran said, his hand gentle on her shoulder. But first, tell me about your lessons with Elena today. She taught me about pack law and why we have rules, Lydia recited dutifully. And about how being strong means protecting people who can't protect themselves. And she paused, her expression growing thoughtful, about how Mama and Daddy used to be very angry before I was born, but love made them better. I exchanged a look with Kieran over our daughter's head. Elena had clearly been taking some creative liberties with our family history, painting our violent past in gentler hues suitable for a child's understanding. The truth was more complex. Love hadn't made us better so much as it had given us something worth being better for. Elena is very wise, I agreed. Now, why don't you go find Uncle Marcus and show him the new flowers that bloomed in the rose garden? Lydia brightened immediately and bounded off toward the gardens, her supernatural grace making the movement look like a dance. Even at 3 years old, she possessed abilities that surpassed most adult werewolves, but she wielded them with a lightness that spoke to her character. She's nothing like we expected, Kieran observed, watching our daughter greet Marcus with an enthusiastic hug that the man returned with obvious affection. She's everything we needed, I corrected. We were so focused on power, on dominance, on being feared. But Lydia, she's teaching us that there are different kinds of strength. It was true. Our daughter's birth had changed everything, not because she'd somehow magically cured us of our darker impulses, but because she'd given us a reason to channel those impulses in new directions. The protective instincts that had once driven us to violence now drove us to create a safe haven for our family and pack. The Council of Alphas wants to meet with her, Kieran said quietly. They're calling it a diplomatic introduction, but we both know what they really want. They want to assess the threat she represents, I said, feeling my protective instincts flare. They want to determine if she's something they can control or something they need to eliminate. And what do we tell them? I smiled, thinking of the butterfly that had played with our daughter, drawn to her inherent gentleness despite the power that radiated from her small form. We tell them she's not a threat to anyone who doesn't threaten her first. But if they come for our family? I let the implications hang in the air. They won't, Kieran said with certainty. They're not stupid enough to start a war they can't win. He was right. The other packs had learned to coexist with us over the past 3 years, recognizing that our power was best left undisturbed. We ruled our territory with a firm but fair hand, protecting those under our care while demanding only loyalty in return. It wasn't the reign of terror our enemies had predicted, it was something far more dangerous to the old order. It was proof that change was possible. Mama. Daddy. Lydia's voice carried up from the garden, where she was now helping Marcus plant new bulbs in the flower beds. Come see what we're making. We made our way down to the gardens, where we found Marcus patiently guiding Lydia's small hands as she carefully placed tulip bulbs in the prepared soil. His face, so much like his brother's but without the calculating coldness, was soft with genuine affection as he worked with our daughter. She's a natural gardener, he told us as we approached. These flowers will bloom beautifully in the spring. By spring, she'll probably be able to make them bloom with just her touch, I said, only half joking. Lydia's abilities grew stronger every day, manifesting in ways that constantly surprised us. Would that be so terrible? Marcus asked, his tone thoughtful. A child who can bring life instead of taking it. The question hit deeper than he probably intended. In the old days, before Lydia, our power had been purely destructive. We'd ruled through fear, conquered through violence, built our empire on the bones of our enemies. But our daughter was teaching us that true strength could create as well as destroy. No, I said softly, watching Lydia pat soil around a newly planted bulb with infinite care. It wouldn't be terrible at all. Elena appeared at the edge of the garden, tablet in hand as always, but her usual serious expression was softened by a smile as she watched Lydia work. Sorry to interrupt, but we have visitors. The Moonrise Pact delegation has arrived for the treaty negotiations. I sighed. Politics were a necessary evil of leadership, but they seemed particularly tedious when weighed against an afternoon in the garden with my family. How many? Just 3. Alpha Sarah Moonrise and 2 advisors. They seem nervous. Of course they were nervous. The Moonrise Pack had been one of our most vocal critics in the early days, spreading rumors about our supposed monstrosity and calling for other packs to unite against us. But as years passed and those dire predictions failed to materialize, their tune had changed to one of cautious diplomacy. I want to meet them, Lydia announced, looking up from her gardening with dirt-smudged cheeks and bright eyes. Absolutely not, Kieran and I said in unison, causing our daughter to giggle at our synchronized response. Why not? Elena says I need to learn about diplomacy, and Uncle Marcus says the best way to learn is by doing. Marcus held up his hands in surrender. Don't blame me for this one. She came up with that logic all on her own. Because she's 3 years old, I pointed out. Diplomacy can wait until she's older. How much older? Lydia asked with the persistence that all 3-year-olds seem to possess in abundance. Much older, Kieran said firmly. Like 25. That's too long. Lydia protested. I'll be old by then. Elena laughed at our daughter's outraged expression. Don't worry, little wolf. I'm sure your parents will let you sit in on some meetings when you're ready. But for now, why don't you help me prepare refreshments for our guests? Lydia brightened at the prospect of helping, as she always did. Our daughter had inherited our strength and our abilities, but she'd also developed a generous spirit that delighted in making others happy. It was a trait that never failed to amaze me, considering her parentage. Can I make the special cookies? The ones with the sparkles? If you promise to be careful with your strength, Elena agreed. Remember, human hands, not wolf strength. I know, Lydia said with the exaggerated patience of a child who'd heard this reminder many times before. She gave Marcus one last hug before skipping toward the manor with Elena, chattering excitedly about cookie recipes and proper tea service. She's extraordinary, Marcus said quietly, watching her go. David would have loved her. It took me a moment to realize he was talking about his brother, my adoptive father. The man who had sold me, poisoned me, betrayed me in every way possible. But time and parenthood had given me a different perspective on old hurts. He was doing what he thought was best for his family, I said, surprising myself with the words. I don't forgive him for it, but I understand it now. Marcus nodded, his expression grateful. He regretted it, toward the end. The poisoning especially. He used to say that watching you grow up weak when he knew you were meant for greatness was the worst thing he'd ever done. Weakness was never an option for Clara, Kieran said, his hand finding mine. She just needed to find her strength. And you helped her find it, Marcus observed. In your own terrifying way. I laughed at that, remembering the girl I'd been just a few years ago, frightened, uncertain, convinced she was worthless. That girl couldn't have imagined the life I live now, surrounded by people who loved and respected me, raising a daughter who would never know what it felt like to be unwanted. We helped each other, I corrected. We were both lost before we found each other. It was the truth, though not the whole truth. We'd been lost, but we'd also been dangerous, 2 broken souls whose union could have destroyed everything around us. Instead, somehow, we'd found a way to build something beautiful from our shared darkness. The Moonrise Pact negotiations went smoothly, as they always did these days. Alpha Sarah Moonrise was a practical woman who recognized that cooperation served her pack better than hostility. The treaty we signed would ensure safe passage through our territory for her people, while they would provide advance warning of any threats approaching from the Eastern Territories. Lydia, despite our earlier refusal, had managed to charm her way into serving refreshments to our guests. She moved through the formal meeting room with the grace of someone much older, offering cookies and tea with a solemnity that was utterly adorable. Our guests were clearly enchanted by her, though I could see the wariness in their eyes when they thought we weren't looking. They were right to be wary. Lydia was indeed dangerous, perhaps more dangerous than Kieran and I combined. But her danger lay not in violence or aggression, but in her ability to make people love her. She was building bridges we'd never thought to construct, creating alliances through affection rather than intimidation. "She'll be a remarkable leader someday," Alpha Sarah commented as Lydia carefully served her a second cup of tea. "You must be very proud." "Every day," I agreed, watching our daughter beam at the compliment. "Will she, that is, does she show signs of inheriting your abilities?" It was a delicate question, one that asked without asking whether our child would grow up to be as feared as her parents. I considered my answer carefully. "She's inherited our strength," I said finally. "But she's also inherited something we had to learn, the wisdom to know when not to use it." It was true. Lydia possessed all our supernatural abilities and more, but she wielded them with a restraint that spoke to her character. She could have demolished the garden walls if she'd wanted to, but instead she used just enough strength to help Marcus plant flowers. She could have intimidated our guests into submission, but instead she won them over with kindness. "That's reassuring," Alpha Sarah said, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced. "Our daughter will never be a threat to those who mean her no harm," Kieran said firmly. "But she will always be a threat to those who do." It was as clear a warning as he could give without being overtly hostile. Our guests understood the message. Lydia was under our protection, and anyone who threatened her would face consequences beyond imagination. After the delegation left, we gathered as a family in our private quarters for dinner. Lydia regaled us with stories from her day, including detailed descriptions of every butterfly she'd seen and her theories about where they went when it got dark. "Maybe they have little butterfly houses," she suggested seriously. "With tiny beds and butterfly blankets." "That's entirely possible," I agreed, delighting in her imagination. "What do you think butterfly houses look like?" "Purple and gold, like their wings. And they probably have flower gardens too, but really small ones." She paused in her animated description to take a bite of her dinner. "Do you think butterfly children go to butterfly school?" "I'm sure they do," Kieran said solemnly. "They probably learn very important butterfly subjects like flower appreciation and wind navigation." Lydia giggled at the idea. "Wind navigation sounds hard. I'm glad I don't have to learn that." "You're learning something much more important," I told her. "You're learning how to be kind and strong at the same time. Like you and Daddy." The innocent question caught me off guard. Kind wasn't a word I would have used to describe Kieran and myself, even now. We were fair, protective, loyal to those we cared about, but kind seemed too gentle a word for what we'd become. "We try to be," Kieran answered diplomatically. "It's not always easy, but we try." "Because of me?" Lydia asked, her green eyes serious. "Because of you," I confirmed. "You make us want to be better than we were." And it was true. Our daughter had changed us in ways we'd never expected, not through magic or manipulation, but simply by existing. By needing us to be worthy of her love. By showing us every day that strength without compassion was just brutality, and that true power lay in knowing when to fight and when to nurture. Later that evening, after Lydia had been tucked into bed with stories about butterfly kingdoms and flower gardens, Kieran and I stood on our balcony watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The mate bond that connected us had evolved over the years, becoming less about possession and more about partnership. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked quietly. "The way things happened, the choices we made?" Kieran was quiet for a long moment, considering the question seriously. "I regret the pain we caused. I regret that it took us so long to find a better way. But regret the end result?" He pulled me closer, his arms encircling me with gentle strength. "Never. You and Lydia are the best things that ever happened to me. Even though we're not the people we used to be." especially because we're not the people we used to be." His voice was firm with conviction. "Those people were broken, Clara. They were powerful but empty, strong but hollow. They could never have created something like this." He gestured toward the manor below us, where warm lights spilled from windows and the sound of pack members' conversations drifted up from the courtyard. Our territory had become more than just a place ruled by fear, it had become a home. "I love you," I said simply, because after everything we'd been through, it was still the most important truth. "I love you too," he replied. "Both of you. More than I ever thought possible." From Lydia's room came the soft sound of our daughter talking to herself as she settled into sleep, probably continuing her conversation with imaginary butterflies. The sound filled me with a contentment I'd never known was possible. We were monsters, Kieran and I. We always would be. But we were also parents, partners, protectors of something precious and good. We'd learned that monsters could love just as fiercely as angels, and sometimes more truly. And our beautiful, impossible daughter was proof that even from the darkest beginnings, something wonderful could grow. The future stretched before us, full of uncertainty and possibility. Other packs would continue to test us, our daughter would grow into her formidable abilities, and new challenges would arise that we couldn't yet imagine. But whatever came, we would face it together, the blood Clara and her mad alpha, and the extraordinary child who had taught them that love was the most powerful magic of all. The end. Thank you for listening to this story. Like, share and subscribe for more.